Hello, everyone. The chair detects a quorum. Without objection, we'll call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Opposed? No? Ayes have it. We adopted the agenda. Next item for business is the approval of the July 24th minutes. And is there a motion? Second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Minutes have been adopted. Now, let's see. Any council members in the audience? Council lady. And would you all like to speak before or during the before? All right, Council Lady Weiner, please come up and talk.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate the time. Just briefly, I wanted to refer to 2013 Z008, PR001, commonly known as the Bluffs at Sawyer Brown. I am asking for indefinite deferral on this particular piece of property after conversations with the homeowners in the neighborhood, as well as the planners. We have come to an agreement and a substantially reduced plan that everybody seems to be happy with. And so with that, I'm going to ask that this be deferred indefinitely. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Councilman.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it. I also saw Councilman Westerholm. I see Councilman Westerholm. You want to wait until the item is up? Okay. I also saw Council Lady Evans. Would you like to speak now, or?
No, actually. Can I reserve my time for after the public comment on my case and have maybe a little more than 2 minutes?
I think that's
an important issue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Council Lady. We'll do that. Note. Any other council members that I missed? I didn't see any in the audience. Okay, we want to make sure. All right. Next is the Nashville Next update. Michael, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Briggs. I'm in the Community Plans Division, and I'm briefly going to talk about the natural resources and hazard adaptation work that's been underway with Nashville Next. You'll remember that we have 7 resource teams, and that all members of the resource teams, a list of them can be found on the NashvilleNext.net website. The Natural Resources and Hazard Adaptation resource team members are providing their local expertise to the steering committee and the broader community so we can understand the trends that will affect Nashville's natural resources and how we can better adapt to extreme weather over the next 25 years. They've developed goals and policies to achieve the community's vision for natural resources, and they'll be working on action items this fall. Remember that all of the resource teams will work to make sure the future land use, transportation, and infrastructure investments will be harnessed to meet these goals. The resource teams have committed to work in phases throughout the process of developing the Nashville Next plan. Right now they're on a break, but you'll notice that we will be reviewing a preferred scenario with them in the fall, and they will reconvene at that time. The Natural Resources and Hazard Adaptation Resource Team has identified several issues of importance impacting the area's natural environment and our community's ability to adapt to the increasing number of extreme weather events. As you know, through this process, we anticipate another 185,000 new residents in Davidson County by 2040. This level of population growth puts pressure on our more rural and natural environments to be developed. And a growth pattern that is more spread out and lower in density across the county has a greater likelihood of damaging key natural assets, polluting more streams, and also making the county less resilient to weather events such as flooding. The resource team members also want to introduce the idea of creating a culture of sustainability in Nashville. One way to do that is ensuring that Nashville's infrastructure, buildings, and natural surroundings reflect sustainability and encourage sustainable living. The sustainable way to develop should be our preferred method to develop. These methods might include utilizing Metro's low-impact development manual, more often, which encourages handling stormwater runoff more naturally with bioswales and green roofs, And we should also be prepared to continue funding and maintaining our growing system of parks, open space, and greenways. And with the culture of sustainability, recycling is easy and convenient. Children learn sustainable habits in reducing energy use, and it's easier to walk, bike, and take transit. And these behaviors make a more resilient community when a disaster occurs. And when we experience extreme weather like flooding or drought, Nashville is prepared to respond. The region's natural resources are cared for and maintained, and this protection helps the city handle major rain events by reducing runoff and allowing the ground to recharge more during heavy rains. Unfortunately, we've also had a history of damaging our most vulnerable neighborhoods and residents who may not have had a voice in the past decision-making. Noxious facilities and constructing infrastructure has divided some neighborhoods, and we should strive to lessen these impacts upon our neighbors and actively work to engage those who are overlooked and not heard in the planning process. Open debate and different perspectives make a strong and resilient Nashville. So we've been reviewing with the community a draft set of goals and policies that the resource team has developed. And keep in mind that the goals are broad level statements for a future condition. And again, we'll be working with the resource teams to develop action items this fall that relate to these goals and policies. There are 5 goals for natural resources and hazard adaptation, and they broadly address the issues that I just covered. The first goal emphasizes building a culture of sustainability through education and changes in behavior. We want to prompt action amongst our residents. The second goal relates to Nashville's businesses and neighborhoods and their contribution to conservation and reducing waste. And goal 3 is related to the entire built and natural environments and being prepared to handle the impact of hazards and catastrophes. The fourth goal emphasizes the investment, both everyday maintenance and financial investment in Nashville's natural environment for a range of purposes. And finally, goal 5 reiterates that all communities need to be considered for environmental protection and that all people need access to Nashville's natural environment. Access to our surroundings will make for a happier and healthier community. So that briefly wraps up where we are with the Natural Resources and Hazard Adaptation team, and I can stay really quick to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commission members, any questions on that? And I do want to just take a note while we have a big audience, is that Nashville Next is a really big deal. And if you care about planning in Nashville, you need to check it out, come to the meetings, be involved. And so that's why we put Nashville Next on the agenda. So thank you for giving us that update. Any questions from the commission members? All right, next is the deferrals and withdrawals. And I believe Carrie has that list for us. Carrie? No.
We have several items for deferral tonight. The first item is item number 2 on page 5 of your agenda. That's 2014 SP 041001 at 1212 Hawkins Street. And that's a request to rezone from RM20 to SPR zoning for properties located at 1212 Hawkins Street and 1119 and 1121 Sigler Street to permit up to 45 multifamily units. And the staff recommendation is to defer to the August 28th, 2014 Planning Commission meeting. At the request of Councilor Wiener, we have item number 3, 2013Z008PR001 on page 5 of your agenda. This is a request to rezone from SP to RS80 zoning for property located at Sawyer Brown Road unnumbered, and the staff recommendation is to defer indefinitely. Item number 4 is 2014Z044PR001, also on page 5 of your agenda, a request to rezone from R15 to MUL and RM15A for properties located at 645 Old Hickory Boulevard and 7461 Charlotte Pike, and the staff recommendation is to defer to the September 11th, 2014 Planning Commission meeting. Item number 5 on page 6 of your agenda is 2014 S151006, the James Burns re-subdivision, and is a request for final plat approval to create 6 lots within the Greenwood Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District on property located at 909 Manila Avenue. The staff recommendation is to defer indefinitely. Item 6A, 2014 CP 007-005, the West Nashville Plan Amendment, is a request to amend the West Nashville Community Plan 2009 update by changing the community character policy from a district industrial policy to an urban mixed-use neighborhood policy for property located at 800 44th Avenue North, and the staff recommendation is to defer indefinitely. Along with 6A, item 6B is 2014 Z048PR001, a request to rezone from IR to MULA zoning for property located at 800 44th Avenue North, and the staff recommendation is to defer indefinitely.
Thank you, Carrie. So, Commission members, you've heard it. Items 2, 3, 4, 5, 6A, and 6B for deferral. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Any discussion? All in favor of deferral, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Those items will be deferred. Next is the consent agenda. Carrie?
First, I'll read the legal notice. As information for our audience, if you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Planning Commission today, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for writ of cert with the Davidson County Chancery Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of entry of the Planning Commission's decision. To ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met, please be advised that you should contact independent legal counsel. And as notice to the public, our items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda. Our first item on the consent agenda is item number 7, 2011 SP 009-005 on page 7 of your agenda. This is amendment number 2 to the One City SP. This is a request to amend the One City Specific Plan District for properties located at 1 City Avenue, 5 City Boulevard, 6 City Boulevard, 20th Avenue unnumbered, and Charlotte Avenue unnumbered to increase the maximum number of residential units allowed within the SP district, and the staff recommendation is to approve the conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Item number 8, also on page 7, is 1032 Manor Avenue, 2014 SP 058-001. It's a request to rezone from OL to SPR zoning for property located at 1032 Manor Avenue to permit up to 6 attached residential dwelling units, and the staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Item number 10 on page 7 of your agenda is 2014 NL 003-001 Cowboy Jack Music Studio. It's a request to apply a neighborhood landmark overlay district to property located at 3405 Belmont Boulevard. The staff recommendation is to approve. Item number 11 on page 8 of your agenda is 2014 P 013-005, the Mill Creek Town Center. It's a request to revise the preliminary plan and for final site plan approval for a portion of the Mill Creek Town Center Commercial Planned Unit Development Overlay District for a property located at 7907 Concord Hills Drive to permit the development of a medical office and retail building. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions. Also on page 8 of your agenda is item number 12, the Nashville West Shopping Center, 2014 P 036-004, a request to revise the preliminary plan and for final site plan approval for a portion of the West Nashville Commercial Planned Unit Development Overlay District for a property located at 6704 Charlotte Pike to permit the development of a 5,000 square foot retail building and a 3,710 square foot restaurant. The staff recommendation is to approve with conditions. Item number 13 on page 8 of your agenda is 8485P001, the Biltmore Commercial PUD, a request to revise the preliminary plan and for final site plan approval for a portion of the Biltmore Commercial Plan Unit Development Overlay District for property located at 8020 McCrory Lane to permit the development of an automobile convenience facility. The staff recommendation is to approve with conditions. In other business, on page 9, we have a new employee contracts for Hariono Prabha and Jennifer Nalbantian. Item 15, item 16, an employee contract renewal for Michael Briggs, and item number 20, to accept the director's report and approve the administrative items. That's the end of the consent agenda.
Thank you. So, to make sure we are all straight on the consent agenda, items number 7, item number 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, and 20
That's correct.
are on the consent agenda. Does anybody object to having those items on the consent agenda? All right, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda? Second? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Say no. Ayes have it. And before we get started, real quick, into our agenda, I first want to welcome a new commission member. Thank you for being here today, is Jessica Farr. Thank you, and we welcome you, and thank you for giving up your time and your service to this commission, and we really look forward to having you here, and so you're welcome.
Also, just to let the commission know that Mr. Lehman is not here because Bob and Blythe had a bouncing baby girl last night, 8 pounds 9 ounces. Glenn Elizabeth, I think is there, Glenn Elizabeth, and so they're both doing fine. At least Blythe and Glenn are. We're not sure about Bob.
That's great. Good
Mr.
news.
Chairman,
Yes,
before we
Mr.
start,
Chairman.
I'm going to recluse myself from item number 1 from the discussion and the voting.
So noted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that brings us to item number 1, and we will open up this item for a public hearing. And is the applicant here? Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. See, I'm opening up the public hearing already. So please, Greg. Go ahead, Greg. I mean, Jason, sorry.
Item 1 is a request to rezone property located on Charlotte Pike. It's entitled the Hillwood Court at Nashville West. The properties consist of 2 properties that are outlined in red. The request is for preliminary SP to permit up to 40 residential dwellings. Staff recommendation is approve with conditions and disapprove without all staff conditions. The property is approximately 3.2 acres in size. It has 2 single-family homes on it. The current zoning is RS40 and R40. The RS40 only permits single-family. The R40 permits 2-family. With the total, with both of those lots, you could have approximately 3 units with a duplex on the R40 and 1 single-family on the RS40. This is the site plan. It calls for 3 different housing types. At the front, closer to Charlotte, you have manor homes. Those are 18 units with 6 units in each building. Again, this is also approximately 13 units per acre. Going towards the south, you would have units fronting onto open space. The 10 units directly behind the manor home are townhomes, so these are attached. Running along the eastern and the southern property lines, or the southern side and the eastern side, you have what they're calling cottage units that are detached, and there's 12 of those. And those also are oriented towards the open space. All the townhomes and the cottages have garages, with a majority of the cottage units having detached garages. The manor houses' height is 3 stories and 35 feet, and that's the maximum. And townhomes are 3 stories and 35 feet, and the cottages are 2 stories and 30 feet. There is a historical wall along Charlotte Pike. The plan incorporates that wall into the design, and also includes an 8-foot sidewalk with a 6-foot grass strip. Excuse me. In places where there are existing trees, they plan to put tree wells to protect as many of the trees as possible along that historic wall. The plan has access from Charlotte Pike on the western side, which also provides a sidewalk into the development. The access point along the eastern side, that is an emergency access only. There is a 50-foot buffer along the rear property line, and both the eastern and western property line have landscaping and a 6-foot fence. This is some renderings of the manor home, which would be along Charlotte. This is some examples of the townhomes. These would be the attached directly behind the manor homes. Another example. This is an example of the cottage units, which are detached. And Here's another example. Just a little history on this one. It's been around since November of last year. So it was deferred indefinitely by the Planning Commission on February 13th. At that time, it included an additional property, which was the adjacent property to the west, and was also for 64 units instead of the 40 units proposed today. This is in the West Nashville Community Plan. The policy is neighborhood maintenance. There's also a special policy, which is called the Infill Policy, Area 3. The neighborhood maintenance is intended to maintain a general character of an area, but it also recognizes changes over time. The special policy for this area, and it's the area outlined or highlighted in yellow here. This is the special infill area, which runs from the neighborhood maintenance all the way up to the commercial center policy to the east. This policy recognizes the fact that you have Nashville West and you have this corridor that's rapidly changed and is intensified, including not only commercial development but traffic. And so it recognizes the fact that single-family residential is probably not the most appropriate as far as being this close to intense commercial and all the traffic that it generates. So it's not being sustainable in the long run. This request also, well, I'll go back to that and says that the policy, that the plan does meet the land use policies for the neighborhood maintenance as well as the special policy. This also supports several critical planning goals as outlined in your staff report, which supports infill development, provides a range of housing options, helps to create walkable neighborhoods, and supports a variety of transportation choices. In conclusion, staff is recommending approval with conditions and disapproval without all conditions, as the request is consistent with the land use policies and meets several critical planning goals.
Thank you, Jason. All right, Commissioners, before we open this up, we've had a neighborhood request. So, Rick, if you could guide us.
Yes. As you know, under your rules, a representative from a neighborhood may request to speak up to 5 minutes if that request is made in writing prior to the meeting. We did get a request from a neighborhood representative that said he was speaking for the neighborhood. It was provided only on the request to speak form. As you know, that if that's accepted, which is it's a choice of the commission, then he would be speaking for all the individuals in that group, and then they would only be allowed to speak if they're not speaking as members of that organization. So I just wanted to present that to you. Douglas Pierce is the gentleman. Is he the neighborhood representative?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and so if
Mr. Bernhardt, Mr. Chairman, since this doesn't come up very much, we probably need to make sure that the folks who have come here from that neighborhood group, is it a group?
Yes.
That they're okay with that and realize that they'll be giving up their right to speak independently.
They're right here, and if you want a show of hands, you can have that.
Yeah, if you could, let's see a show of hands who's here. And is that in for?
Well, it's to let him represent them.
To let you represent them. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm fine with that as long as nobody's going to need to speak after from your group.
Well, let's ask the commissioners, is there objection to allowing the 5 minutes from any commission members? Okay, seeing no objection, we will allow you to speak for 5 minutes when that opportunity comes up. Thank you. So, let's open up item number 1 for public hearing. The applicant gets 10 minutes to speak. I also want to tell the applicant that you have 2 minutes. Who is the applicant? Mr. White, obviously you know that you have 2 minutes for rebuttal. So
you can reserve 2 minutes.
You can reserve 2 minutes for rebuttal. Mr. White.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Tom White. I live at 36 Old Club Court along with Roy Dale. We represent the applicant in this matter. I would request the 2 minutes for rebuttal. There are a number of other people that were here to speak in favor of the project that are not part of the applicant team. But the first thing I'll mention to the members of the commission that's always perhaps the most critical thing is it or is it not consistent with the policy? There's no dispute about it being consistent with the policy. That's been covered at some length by the staff report. I just want to confirm that it's not a gray area. It's totally consistent with the policy. The second thing that I'll mention, if you look at the the guts of the staff report where they evaluate this project item by item. The first thing they indicate is that it's clearly served by adequate infrastructure. Most of you are familiar with the property. You know where it's located on Charlotte, directly across from Nashville West. It's frankly perhaps the most ideal located piece of property for this type of proposal in that West Nashville area. The staff goes on to talk about it does give additional housing options, which is something that's clearly needed and suggested not just in this proposal but in other studies in this area. They talk about the adequate open space and the sufficient sidewalks. Again, critical things in this particular part, all parts of the county, but specifically here with the traffic on Charlotte. Talk about the walkability within the neighborhood, which is particularly important, and as stressed so clearly, and I think the members of this commission are aware from the presentation, it's directly across from Nashville West. So if you're talking about a place where, as always, we talk about live and work, et cetera, here's a perfect example of it directly across from Nashville West. The pedestrian access is good, and the Nashville West development has been there approximately 10 years, been a mainstay of the community in that particular part, and again, direct access across the street from that for the walkability component, which is where the city is trying to get. With respect to the composition of the units, as a result of a neighborhood meeting that took place, the units on the backside are now, I think, a minimum of 80 feet from the property line, which I think is particularly important in deference to the neighbors on that side. And if I have my numbers correct, basically you've got 70% of the density of the development is within the front 30 to 40% of the property facing Charlotte, which is where it should be, actually on the Charlotte front side, not on the back side. With respect to other items that came out of a neighborhood meeting, as the staff commented, the density in units has gone from 64 to 40. One parcel's been deleted from the proposal. And again, I think with the staff recommendation of approval, we urge you to approve this today, not to defer this. We've got a legislative process ahead of us here. We know that that'll take a public hearing in the Metro Council. It'll take whatever neighborhood meeting the council lady directs us to. Council Lady Evans has been very generous with her time in discussing this possibility of this project and where it stands. And I think, as she commented, she'll address the council with her own comments. So we respectfully ask that the matter be approved today, go on to the next process, which is a legislative one. We'll go to whatever meetings were requested to, including the public hearing at the Metro Council when this comes up. Thank you for your courtesies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Roy Dale with Dale & Associates. The problem with preparing a speech is that someone may basically talk about what you've already written about, so I'm going to wing it a little bit. I think we represent a large number of infill developments in Davidson County before this commission. And I have seen over the last few months that the commission has struggled a little bit over infill development in Nashville. But I think we share that infill should be placed where it's appropriate. And I think that we would all agree that infill is placed more appropriately along corridors or within specific nodes. And in this case, in a specific policy that was adopted for this specific use. And when we look at this special policy that was adopted as part of the land use plan, it's probably one of the most specific policies we've ever seen. I mean, it goes into great detail. And as a result of having that before us, we actually prepared this plan based upon the specific items that were mentioned in this policy, to preserve the old stone wall and the canopy along Charlotte, to provide manor homes along the front, to provide a density from higher density to lower density as you go from the front to the rear. And that's basically what we've done. We did have a community meeting back in February where we had presented a plan. I think the plan had 64 units on it. And quite honestly, we had great input from this meeting because the transition was not good. There was only maybe a 20-foot buffer along the rear, and the housing was sort of spread all the way across the property. And as a result of that meeting specifically, the plan was revised, the number of units were lessened, more density was pushed towards the front, there's a 50-foot buffer along the rear, the massing of the housings was looked at. It was probably all three-story buildings originally. It starts off as three-story manor homes. It transitions down to a one-story garage and a two-story cottage. So in essence, from our rear property line to the closest neighbor, the back of their houses are over 100 feet. From our property line forward, we've got a 50-foot buffer, an alley, a one-story structure, and then the buildings begin. So it's over 100 feet. So you're talking probably 250 to 300 feet between the rear of these homes and the rear of the homes that are adjacent to this. This is obviously supported by staff as it meets all the conditions of the special policy, and we would hope that you would support them today and recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh.
One more. Good afternoon. Keith Covington with Third Coast Design Studio. We are, along with Dillon Associates, part of the design team for this project. And our focus mainly was on the conceptual architecture, landscape design for the project. Just want to take a quick minute to reiterate and add a couple of notes about the architecture and this development as a whole. As Roy said, you know, the transition was a key here, and what we learned very quickly from the earlier meeting is that we needed to create a clearer transition between the multifamily buildings up on Charlotte to the single-family neighborhoods beyond, and we've certainly done that with this design. You have 3-story manor houses transitioning to the 2-story townhouses to the 1-story to the 2-story cottages. One other point about the manor houses themselves. That's a specific policy recommendation in the community plan that these multifamily buildings along Charlotte Pike be designed in a manor house type, and so the conceptual architecture is reflective of that. Just briefly from a landscape standpoint, I would say that this large open space is one of the central features in the development. It's framed by buildings and landscape, and it provides a great deal of active open space, which is so important in these types of developments. And in addition, again, just to reiterate, that buffer has been greatly increased from the 20 feet or so that it was to 50 feet plus landscaping. So just wanted to hit on a few of those notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, closing comment by me is that there's a number of people here that are supportive of this project. We've asked all of them not to speak, but I would like a show of hands of the people here in the audience that are supportive of the project. They will address the commission, but we wanted to make sure we've asked them all not to come up and say the same things. This normally comes from the chair. We took that prerogative with them. Thank you for your
Thank
courtesy.
you, Mr. White. You have anybody else? You have 2 minutes for rebuttal. Thank you. Now, are there any other proponents of the project that would like to speak in favor of the project? You would have 2 minutes to speak. You'd like to come? Oh, come forward, please. Please state your name and your address.
My name is Pat Wagoner. I live at 5198 Regent Drive, and I'm helping I'm the real estate agent on behalf of the Neelys on the project. But I just wanted to say that the timing is critical to both of these families that are involved in the sale. There's some aging issues and some medical issues that they're going to need funds to help with, and this is very timely. The design under the guidelines meet the West Nashville Community Plan. We'll provide the new ingress and egress with turning lanes, and this across from Nashville West. So we like the closeness and walkability. The West Nashville Plan did not want commercial or apartments on this side of Charlotte Pike. So these one-family owned projects fit into what the land use policy calls for. And then 70% of the density, as you've heard, is in the first 30% of the project. So we think it meets the needs of the community and the guidelines for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in support of the project, please line up in the microphone. State your name and your address, please.
My name is Pete Prosser. I live at 4931 Danby Drive. As one of the members, thank you for your time today. Nashville's growth patterns, as we all know, is quite exponential. We're facing a lot of housing shortages. And I understand the need for us as a community to continue to grow and to expand, but it has to be smart growth as well. And I think that this proposed design is smart growth in line with what Nashville needs. All the time I hear from realtors how many houses they're looking for. They've seen everything on the market. There is a demand for the public with all the people that are relocating here. You've heard the number put out, 185,000, 200,000. And I believe if Nashville is going to stay on a strong growth pattern, we're going to...
We'll reset you. Sorry. Give a minute.
I believe for our community to continue to remain viable as it has been in the past, and it's ongoing as we look ahead, this project is going to help alleviate some of the shortages we have in housing in our current communities. I think if you polled a lot of the realtors, I am a realtor, I work with Zeitlin Realtors, I'm on several committees with GNAR, we consistently hear the need for communities like this and or just homes available. All the time I get emails regarding we have a shortage of homes. This is a smart plan. It does meet the policy as it's been reiterated many times. So I'd just like to recommend that you approve today and not defer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Please state your name and address.
I'm Tiff Kennedy. I live at 6817 Charlotte Pike. I'm to the west of this property. I'm not with this group or not with that group, but I am for the property because I think it would help our neighborhood. We have a huge shopping center across the street. If we don't keep feeding that shopping center with new money, which this demographic will probably do for us, then it's going to look like Metro Center or Hickory Hollow or Bellevue Mall. I don't want that. I'm 300 yards from the entrance to Target. I don't want to look over there and see some used car lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Donna Ackerman. I live at 4203 Belmont Boulevard, and I am in support of this property because I work in real estate and I see the great need for good housing in this area. I shop in this area, my family shops in this area, and I would love to see good homes there, homes that people will buy and live in, not apartments. And I heard the gentleman earlier talk about the growth of Nashville. I think he said 185,000 new residents. Those residents need a place to live, and this would be an ideal place for them.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the project? Seeing none, the opponents of the project, please line up behind the microphone. Mr. Pierce, the neighborhood. You have 5 minutes to speak. Please state your name and address, who you represent.
My name is Doug Pierce. I live at 748 Atkinson Lane, and I represent the Atkinson Lane residents. Atkinson Lane is the next street south of Charlotte, so it borders this development here. And we request that that this application be denied, or in the alternative that it be deferred. With respect to the deferral, it's been suggested that there's been a community meeting related to this project. There has not been a community meeting related to this project. There was a community meeting related to a completely different project, included another lot, and just totally different situation. And so now we're presented with this, so at a minimum there should be a deferral. But this request should be denied because this is inconsistent with what the 2009 community plan for West Nashville was, as indicated by what I've printed off was page 58 of the West Nashville community plan. That gave an example of what the infill would be at the eastern end of Charlotte Avenue, and this is at the western end. And at the eastern end, there was the lots in the back were smaller than the lots that are behind this development. Yet, despite the fact that the lots were smaller there was less density for this proposal shown on this plan that was approved in '09. Specifically, there were 2 layers of developments, whereas this, or of housing, whereas this one shows 3 layers. So what we have here is greater density in the area where there is already lesser density, when what was shown on the 2009 plan was lesser density opposed to lesser density. Currently, what that area is right now is at the lowest level of density of the 5 levels of density shown by the Metro's classifications. And so they want to take it not up to level 2, 3, but all the way to the next to the highest level density. So all of the goals or desires that the staff and Mr. White have suggested can all be met with simply a lesser density, which will give us the better transition. And transition is important. I understand that the density in of itself might not be the issue, but that's what gives us the transition. That is the yardstick by which this should be measured. with respect to transition within this one development here, it's only one lot deep. And if you start dissecting it, well, you can dissect the last 25% of that lot, and it's a density of nobody because that's no one there. This is one development, and it is at the highest, next to the highest level density, and it's going to be backed up to the lowest level density. So that is not a transition. And I believe that it is inconsistent with the 2009 plan. I also want to point out that since the 2009 plan, there's been a change on the other side of the street, on the other side of Charlotte. Specifically, that plan showed almost 6 acres of open space, and everybody knew what that was. That was the police precinct, and that was going to be moved. That was understood at the time. But it was our understanding that that would remain open space. But one of the items on the consent agenda that, before we got to this point, was the fact that now that's going to be heavily commercialized development. So for that reason, when there's a change on one side of the street, we need a change on this side of the street. We've lost the open space over there. Here we need to have the lesser density in this development. Addressing briefly a concern about was concerned that there needed to be some money paid to these property owners. It is our understanding, and I think that we could have people, show people that the same amount of money for the property is available for a lesser density of property. So that simply is not the issue. I know we've had already a show of hands, but the show of hands over here was not the people who actually live there. And I would like the people that I asked you previously to show their hands if they actually live in the Atkinson area. And so those are the people who live in the area, and they are in opposition to this. And I also would like to, I have a number of copies. I would just like to pass out those people in the area that could not.
Please hand it to the staff and we'll put it in the record.
Signed indicating that they are opposed to this as well. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that we oppose this. We request that the commission not approve this and that it be deferred alternatively.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience also wishing to speak against the project that's not with that particular group? Please line up. You have 2 minutes. Please state your name and your address.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Tom Baker. I live at 6811 Fleetwood Drive, Nashville, Tennessee 37205, and I live in the neighborhood. And I would like to confirm our last speaker that there was no neighborhood meeting on this particular plan. The neighborhood meeting, the sole neighborhood meeting that was talked about was on a previous plan. I am against this because of its, not for a development, because it's high density at this point, that it's putting 40 homes on just 2 lots. This is the first development in that corridor, and so this development will set an example for all the other developments that are in that corridor that we've been talking about. And that corridor is supposed to be a transition between commercial and single home, and I do not feel that this high density of this development meets that need for a transition between the two extremes of zoning use. And that it's more akin to commercial property than it is to single homes dwellings at that point. And so I would ask you to vote against this, and if not, defer it until we can actually have a neighborhood meeting on this particular plan. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Lisa Swart. I live at 972 Davidson Drive, Nashville 37205. I've lived there for 2 years. Since I've lived on Davidson Drive, I've had 3 mailboxes. It's getting expensive. What I would like to state is my opposition for this project because of the density. This means that traffic is going to increase through my neighborhood. This is the only neighborhood I know where there are children who play in the streets, and increased traffic are endangering that family lifestyle. There's also congestion on Charlotte itself. I don't know if any studies have been done on exit 201, but if anyone has tried to get home at 5 o'clock, it is a nightmare. And trying to get on exit 2, on the exit on 40 at 8 o'clock in the morning, it is an absolute nightmare. So, additionally, I believe that this project will destroy the nature of our neighborhood. We live in a beautiful environment, and as we start impinging on these lots, you're destroying the character which people have bought in that area for. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Bill Morton. I live at 745 Atkinson Lane. Originally, I am the developer of all the lots that back up to this proposed development. And when I proposed my development, I actually went to the neighbors and asked them what they would like to see to try to keep the characteristics of the neighborhood similar to what's there. I feel like that this development is way too dense for that area, and I would appreciate you either defer this or deny it and consider another proposal. Thank you. Thank
you. My name is Keith Newcomb. I live at 604 Georgetown Drive, and I'm here today representing the Hillwood Neighborhood Association as its recently elected president. I've heard from people in our neighborhood who are both opposed, and you've heard their arguments, and I've heard from one person who is for this argument. We have not been afforded the opportunity to measure the consensus of our neighborhood through neighborhood meetings. I would request that you defer to allow us that opportunity, and we'll report back to you on that. What I am expert on today is the planning process that we went through in this neighborhood for the community character manual. And this corridor was discussed extensively, and it was a focus of discussion. And as it was explained to us, the corridor that was highlighted in yellow as the infill area would transition upward from the western end towards the eastern end to reflect the current levels of density on the eastern end that are across the street at this time, and the fact that there's a full street behind the eastern end between the residential homes that would remain single family. I don't think anyone in that planning process that was from our neighborhood had any idea that the characterization of neighborhood maintenance involved installing 40 units on what amounts to 2 acres. I ask that you consider this. The reality of what we believed we would see there would reflect a more subtle transition from single-family homes from the west side up to the higher density area on the east side. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition? All right, Mr. White, you have 2 minutes for your rebuttal.
Mr. Chairman, the first issue that was addressed by the opposition had to do with the policy in the area. It can't be any more thoroughly addressed by the staff in the recommendation that it does meet the policy. Again, that's something the members of the commission can ask the staff about. It's not something we wrote. It's not something the opponents wrote. It basically was a staff analysis, which is clear that we meet the policy. The second thing that was raised is that it wasn't the appropriate transition. One more time, it's not our argument, it's the staff's clear commitment that it is the appropriate transition in this area. That's not something that we put in there, it's the staff analysis. The next thing I'll mention is that there was a comment that there was not a neighborhood meeting specifically just on this matter, and I'm sure that's not incorrect. My point is there was clearly a neighborhood meeting where this was discussed, and as a result of it, things have happened. The things that have happened are there's now an 80-foot buffer instead of a 20-foot in the back. Secondly, the density went from 64 units to 40 units. Third, a particular piece of the property that was included is no longer included. All those things occurred as a result of that neighborhood meeting. But very importantly, we've been informed by the council lady for the area that there will clearly be a meeting that she will schedule. We're going to go to whatever meetings that we are directed to. Everybody's aware we got 35 district council seats in Davidson County. and generally the council person of the area is the one most focused in on making sure the neighbors have input. In this particular case, we commit to you and to the council lady that we'll attend whatever those meetings are. In addition, we've clearly got the public hearing at the Metro Council, which is customary with second hearing. Finally, an issue was raised about the traffic on Charlotte. At some point, we've got to address the fact that whether it is Charlotte or whether it is West End, there is clearly going to be greater density in this county, as evidenced by every time you hear the report about Nashville Next. Those streets are the main corridors to carry that traffic. If you're going to look for a place where traffic should be allowed, where you're going to walk and use the neighborhoods, have open space, sidewalk, and access to shopping that you can walk to, it's Nashville West across the street. We'd urge your approval, urge you not to defer this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Councilor Evans, as you requested, please.
Okay, this is going to be a pretty important decision, what we do here. This is the first lots that in which we would apply this special policy for a higher density along Charlotte, which is in the community plan. So I want to hear from you guys today your thoughts on that, especially the density and how the depth of these lots is distinguished from the other lots along this 3/4 mile stretch. So, I think that'll help inform, policy going forward. With respect to process, there was a community meeting on the initial proposal. Stuart, it reminded me of some community meetings I went to in 2003. So I have decided not to have another large community meeting until we heard some policy input from you guys, not necessarily a decision today, but some idea what you think about how the policy should be applied, and then how you could consistently apply that policy along this 3/4 length area. And then once I get some feedback from you, we will probably have a small meeting of the immediately affected neighbors. We've had a couple of I've had a couple of offers to do that and start working through what's possible. So look forward to your insight and your input, and if you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Council Lady. Seeing no other speakers, I'll call the public hearing to a close. And now it's time for discussion. But before we get to discussion, we'll need a motion and second. Is there a motion?
To close the public hearing.
Oh, to close. First, we need to close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
You declare that. There's not a motion.
No motion. Okay.
Yeah, we changed that rule. Yeah.
So now it's time for discussion, but we'll need a motion and a second before we get into discussion.
I'd prefer to discuss before we had a motion. You mean a motion to approve or disapprove? I would prefer to hear from everybody before I made a motion.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, we can do that. Stuart, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot that has been said tonight which is absolutely true and really important. And unfortunately, it was said on both sides, so it's not the easiest decision to make, because a lot of what this development represents is much like what we expect on Charlotte. Everything that was suggested in terms of tearing back toward the neighborhood so that you didn't have high density right up against single family, that's certainly true. That's what we would expect from this area. The idea that we need more density on Charlotte and that it is going to be an increasingly important arterial street, that's something I think we all get and are for. And I think some very good points have been made by the proponents and the opponents. I was a little taken aback by the comparison of current to future. Current two structures allowed, 2, 3 maybe, and now 40. You can be for more density, and you can be for something that is consistent with the plan and with the special policy without having 40. 30 meets the policy. I believe. Would it not, Rick?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Or anyway, if I were council member there, I too would be seeking lots of help right now in terms of not just a vote of who's for it and who's against it, but where do we draw the lines? How I guess we draw the lines through this special policy, but how do we determine what more density should mean? Is it 40? Could it be 30? Is it necessary to have 3 levels of density going back to less dense away from Charlotte, or could you do 2? I really believe that it remains a planning issue that is not completely ready for me to vote on. A lot of times it is not a planning issue. We know what the right planning is, and then it becomes a political issue to go forward to the council for discussions of who's for it and who's against it. That's really none of our concern. About how many people show up is not even our concern. But the planning implications of this one, I think, are still a little bit unknown. I just know that it's a pretty big jump from 2 to 40. And it's a pretty big jump from a community meeting where concerns were heard and changes made to then being here. We don't require multiple community meetings. We don't require any, so that's something that the folks need to know. These meetings were not something we required, the one that was held back in February. But I guess for a project of this magnitude and this total surprise that I would imagine most people would feel almost necessitates some more informal processing before the planning implications should even be fully considered. I don't think that on everything. I mean, we could bankrupt whole companies and individuals by having massive meetings over and over and over again. But anyway, those are just a few of my concerns, and I'm essentially in favor of the direction of this. I think all of us would be, because we know that stretch will need to be more dense, and particularly across the street from Nashville West. I think it's uncertain to me as a planning decision maker as to whether we've got the exact right plan yet.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councilman Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I sat here and look at this, we've had some discussions similar to this in other areas. And one of the things I've always tried to look at after hearing this kind of density being built is the parking. And I don't know whether I heard a lot of comments about parking. If it is, I may have missed it. But I've always been of the school of thought that if you're going to build some density such as this, which is an appropriate place to build it, then you have to consider how many cars are going to come in, what kind of parking arrangements will there be for this particular complex, and then you build the rest of it around the parking. You don't have a parking problem, after it's built. So if somebody can explain to me if I missed it about the parking, it'll help me tremendously.
There are a total of 80 parking spaces, including 80. So 2 per unit, plus some surface parking. So it's kind of similar to single-family residential. You're only required to have 2 spaces per unit. So they include the garage parking that's directly for the cottages, as well as the townhomes, and then you have surface parking for the manor homes, and then you have some parallel parking, which is along the western property side.
Okay. Well, looking at the designs and the density, I'm familiar with that particular area because we go out there a lot. My wife stays out there as a second home. But I think that to me, it seems to be appropriate. If the parking is worked out, the design seems to be there. So when the time comes, I think I could easily recommend approval and go forward.
Thank you, Councilman. Jessica.
I actually have a question about the housing prices. What's the range of housing prices for these units? Is that anywhere, any ideas of?
Generally, when it comes to pricing of housing, that's something that we can't really include in a plan. It's something that a commission or a body doesn't necessarily consider.
Mm-hmm.
But these units are certainly quite large, and based upon their location, I'm sure they're going to be very pricey. They're going to be as expensive, I'm sure, as what's adjacent to it. It's about the best way I can answer your question.
Okay.
What, 600,000? Good luck.
Sorry, my question was just in thinking through the goals of Nashville Next and some of the things that we're looking at on density, trying to make sure there's a mixture of housing types that afford different opportunities, and we're talking about walkability and using the shopping center across the street. So I'm just trying to think about the connection between the two, and you know. But I also feel like, you know, in light of where we're going with Nashville Next and the amount of property that's out there and the site plan, the way it's been constructed, this feels appropriate to me relative to what's across the street. I haven't seen exactly what the traffic impacts are. I don't know. I don't know if that's in our report. My guess is that the traffic from 40 units is still not gonna pale in comparison to what the shopping center is creating. But that was the only other outstanding question that I had.
Because of the number of units, I do believe it doesn't require a traffic impact study, but they do have traffic improvements that they would have to make. One of the things they are doing is dedicating right-of-way for, I think, a turn lane into the development. We do have someone for Public Works here if you want to ask more specifics that I won't deal with.
No, that's fine.
Any other questions, Jessica?
No.
I do apologize about coming late. Unfortunately, several accidents on the interstate prevented my timely arrival, and one right out front here also. But I'm first going to have to recuse myself from voting on this today. But because of my late arrival, and I want to make sure that I'm able to review what's been said thus far once it's recorded and up on YouTube, so that if we get an opportunity to vote on this again, I could have a better understanding and be fair to all sides involved.
Thank you, Derek. Jeff?
To follow up on Jessica's point about traffic, help me understand 40 cars turning west and left onto Charlotte across all these lanes, because that seems to be a significant concern when you're going from 2 to 40 and you're trying to turn left and west.
Okay, I'll let Public Works address those.
Good evening, Jonathan Honeycutt with the Department of Public Works. As to add on regarding the number of units, the number of units proposed is below the thresholds that would have triggered a traffic study to be conducted for this property. As far as traffic, there is the access on Charlotte. Part of the traffic requirements that they add accommodations for an additional through lane and to allow for future improvements along Charlotte through that corridor. There's an existing two-way left turn lane existing there now on Charlotte between the Nashville West and the residential side of Charlotte Avenue. So there's a lot of traffic there. So
while the threshold is not met to do a traffic study, I think when we go from the density of 2 to the density of 40 in a state route like Charlotte that's this busy, we're going to have accidents turning left. and that's something that I would ask the applicant to consider. Secondly, Mr. White, I usually am always in agreement with you. In this particular case, walk me through how a pedestrian leaves this development and crosses Charlotte safely to get to Nashville West.
First, with respect to the issue raised about traffic, we, as always, go with the conditions as set by the staff. We were told it was not to be a traffic study. If that's something that's a condition, we'd agree to it, period. As far as the walkability, the comment by the staff was within the development, there was a great deal of open space and sidewalk transition. They can identify that. As far as that particular transition, I'm not recommending that people can walk willy-nilly across Charlotte into Nashville West. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that the traffic lights that are there and the staff can cover those are in a situation where it's a very simple drive access from Charlotte into Nashville West at several different locations. As far as the walkability, the staff comments address the walkability within the development and up and down that stretch of Charlotte, which is what the Nashville Next issue is driving. That's my comments. As far as the access to Nashville West, I can't imagine anybody in that area directly across the street that's not going to be an advocate of shopping and transitioning over there in that development. That was my comment.
Don't disagree with that at all. I think the point to Council Lady Evans is if this is going to be the first to open up density along Charlotte, we certainly don't want people getting in their cars and then going across the street to shop and increasing the traffic. So are we thinking through how pedestrians can cross safely from south to north?
And that's my comment, as you did about the traffic impact study. Every developer, you certainly know this from your own business, that has a request for a development like this comes in and says, what do we need to do? We were told here the traffic study was not required. We're willing to do the traffic study, which can easily address traversing Charlotte at this point. We're willing to do that. Again, as you well know, you do what you're required to do, and then the commission makes a decision and advocates different things. It's a suggestion for a condition. We would agree to that.
At this point in time, and usually Stuart and I are not necessarily always on the same page, I'm with Stuart. I'm with Stuart that I think this may be too great a leap in density to go from 2 to 40, and I think, quite honestly, more time's needed to study this. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Craig.
Thank you. Stuart, recognized.
I'll have to rethink my whole philosophy after that comment from Joe. I really am very sincere that this project has some absolutely great parts to it, and ultimately we're going to approve some kind of version of this. I think, if I've been listening to folks well, I have been of the opinion that this is one of those rare instances where further, prior to council, neighborhood discussions might unearth some good ideas. Obviously, some were unearthed originally back in February. Now that folks have seen it, have thought about it, have heard some of the rationale today for it, it may prove helpful to have further meetings, whether organized by the developer, the council member, whoever, prior to it becoming a legislative act. That's my concern about voting in it today. And my only question is, I don't want to, we can vote it up or down today if there is a reason, if the council member needs that to happen today, or we could not vote it up or down today and defer this in hopes that we can make a better decision having thought about it. I assume the staff has spent countless hours on this, and we've had about an hour. So I just wondered if I could ask Council Lady Evans, is this a problem if we were to try to defer this instead of voting up or down?
Council Lady.
I mean, the applicant, I realize that the property owner is probably in a hurry. I do think it's important to get this right because of the implications along the rest of Charlotte. So I'll defer to the commission. My goal is to make sure we do it right. I'm not a planner though, so I'm counting on you guys to give me the best direction.
Okay.
Well, we need a motion. So, Council Lady, would a 2-meeting deferral or 1 meeting, or to maybe do a community meeting or something?
2 meetings.
Okay.
2 meetings would probably be fine if the applicant can tolerate that, and we'll have some more discussion in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Councilor. We need a motion.
I move deferral for 2 meetings.
Second, there's been a motion and second for deferral for 2 meetings. Any more discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion to defer for 2 meetings, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. It's been
Mr. Chairman, just if I could just address one thing that came up with regard to the design and the density and all that. This is a relatively low-density project for this area, to be quite honest. It's 13 units an acre, which is relatively low, and is clearly within the framework of the plan. I'm not arguing against the deferral. I just want to point that out. Part of the dilemma is that the road in this location, Charlotte, and many, if not most, of our arterials are designed exclusively for automobiles with no consideration for the transition. And so I know the commission knows this, but it's a situation where you can't let the dog wag the tail, because the road has to be redesigned. It has to be redesigned in order to be a road that accommodates all mobility types, including walking and bicycles, and that will have to be done. So my point is not to let the dog of the road wag the tail of what you're really looking for, one way or the other. You have to kind of move forward with that, whether this is right or not. But this plan clearly is within the intent of the policies. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Mr. Director. All right, now we're on to item number 9.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Item number 9 is a zone change request for 1035 West.
Hold on one second. Let's let everybody kind of exit just for a minute or so. If everybody could make their way out quietly, and then we can continue to go. Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman. Do you want to? I don't know. Where's Jeff? He probably went. Hold on a second. Don't go anywhere.
He's planning on coming back.
Yeah, he'll be right there. All right. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Item number 9 is a zone request for 1035 West Eastland. The request is to rezone from OR20 to SP to permit up to 65 units and a maximum commercial square footage of 8,000 square feet. The property is identified in red. This is located in East Nashville, just west of Gallatin Avenue. Staff's recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Current zoning is OR20. The policy is mixed use and community center. The proposed building will front at the corner of Bailey Street and West Eastland Avenue. Identified in the development standards is the proposed uses for each side of that street. Along Bailey Street, residential uses will be allowed only. The height will be a maximum of 4 stories in 48 feet. Along West Eastland, there could be either commercial or residential, and the maximum height would be 4 stories in 52 feet. Some other development standards that have been included, I did not include all of them in the slideshow presentation, but are to identify that parking requirements shall meet the UZO standards. A traffic study may be required at the time of development with a public works approval required. Primary vehicle access will be along the alleyway to the north side of the site, and there will also be a continual access along West Eastland at the bottom of the site. Pedestrian access will be off of Bailey Street and West Eastland. Some illustrative photos will show the intent of the character of the building. And here are some more photos. In conclusion, staff recommends approval with conditions and disapproval without all conditions, including an additional condition that was placed on the desk tonight that identifies the change in height between Bailey Street at 4 stories and a max of 48 feet, and West Eastland at a max of 4 stories and 52 feet.
Thank you. We'll open up item number 9. Oh, Councilman. How are you doing, Councilman? Would you like to speak? Either before or after, it's up to you, Councilman.
I'd like to reserve the fact to speak before and after. I mean, considering last time you guys, took me to a woodshed a little bit, but that's okay. You're supposed to do that. I want to thank the commissioners for their time and braving traffic and leaving their families to volunteer to serve our community. And I just want to say to Bob on television, congratulations. My daughter's a joy of my life, and he's going to see what it means to be just gone. Because daughters do that to you. They make you sensitive, and they make you love life even more. Now on to business. I have spent the last 2 days with an engineer, with different engineers. One in particular, our chief engineer with Public Works. And, I feel inclined to make fun of engineers because my eldest brother is an engineer. And I love him to death. And Mark Massey with Public Works is a great person. In 2008 and in 2011, there's been money allocated to fix or try to address the issues on Gallatin Road along West Eastland. I know one of the concerns given to the committee here and to some of the neighbors is, yes, we do have a traffic issue. And I usually don't like to place the blame on one particular organization, but when the city and the taxpayers of the city pony up the money to fix a certain section, and because a certain group may not be in power in the state government, and that's supposed to and agreed to match funds sometimes, but sometimes not, it can hold up a project that's been approved from local to the state a couple of years. And in this case, maybe 5, 3, 11, depending on the project. Well, what we decided to do was to get that money back and to do it ourselves. Now that Nashville is growing stronger and we have more income coming in, and we need to address this problem because my constituents and also Mr. Westerholm's constituents want to improve this intersection. And I'm 100% in agreement with them. And what we're going to do is, starting next month, start the improvements. First improvement we're going to do is, I know most of us know where East High School, East Middle are on Gallatin Road. We're going to add a turn lane going all the way up to West Eastland. And when we add the turn lane, we're going to add a light so you can turn left on West Eastland instead of having that bottlenecking and holding up everybody from getting to all their great shops and getting to all their homes over there in lovely East Nashville. And by doing that, the fine people who will be living in this great development will be able to quickly get back to their homes if they choose to go Gallatin Road that way. And also to help with pedestrians issues there, next month they're going to be changing out some of the lights going across the street to Kroger, to Aldi, to Regions Bank. And some of those lights don't have sounds. So if you can't hear or see when the light changes, they have to have 4 different sounds, the engineer told me, so that, if you're blind, if you hear a bird chirp at the stop, then you may think it's another section. So they got to have 4 distinct sounds. And they're going to put that in all the crosswalks. There's going to be some restriping. Also, one of the bad ends, I think it's the crosswalk next to Kroger, where Eastland meets the Kroger, going towards, Portland Brew and all those nice places up there. We're going to be doing some streetscaping there to kind of help improve the walkability a little bit so that we can get the pedestrians quickly across the street on that end. But when you add in that turning lane on West Eastland and you widen that area, your traffic's going to flow a lot better, because then people aren't going to be waiting there for a long time to turn, backing up traffic. It's really going to help with school traffic tremendously. I don't know the timeline. If this body and the council sees fit to grant these wonderful people permission to build, and with the blessings of the neighbors, either way, we're going along with this plan because we need it right now. And if in a perfect world, and even in a not so perfect world, production starts in early October. This will be done in 6 months. And what I've heard, I'm not 100% sure, and this is a question you can ask the developer when they come up. I am about 90% sure that this development may not be finished until this time this summer or maybe in June. And those improvements will be done before the new residents will be signing their leases. So that's going to help out tremendously.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate it. Now we'll, anything else, sir? Thank you. Now we'll open up item number 9 for the public hearing. Applicant gets 10 minutes to speak, and you can reserve 2 minutes for rebuttal.
I would like to reserve that time, please. My name is Joni Priest with Hastings Architecture Associates. I'm here to talk to you about 1035 West Eastland, and having listened to the other folks previously talk about density and concerns there, I think this is an ideal place for density in an in-town neighborhood. Currently, the property is one large parking lot that has no stormwater mitigation. It's just one sort of sheet flowing parking lot. There's 20 feet of grade change from the southeast corner to the northwest corner. And so to address that, we've put a very thin building along the edge that will actually stair step down the topography there. The policy for this property is T4 Community Center, a policy that guides new buildings to act as a transition between the commercial and mixed-use character of Gallatin Road, which allows 7-story buildings into the Maxwell Heights neighborhood adjacent. It also asks that they complement the adjacent neighborhoods that it serves and the infrastructure to which it has access. As Nashville continues to grow and the demographics change, we do believe that housing choice will become increasingly important. In fact, we can see that in East Nashville already, where many of the housing opportunities are single family only. 1035 West Eastland is an excellent opportunity for multifamily housing near the Gallatin Road BRT light line, near grocery stores, services, shops, restaurants, schools, and civic institutions. And it's also adjacent to a stable single-family neighborhood. In this place, in this opportunity, or in this location, there will be an opportunity to use transit, walk, and bike to many of those daily activities. We do see that East Nashville is a highly desirable neighborhood and an increasingly changing price point also. So we are aiming at this point to do kind of efficiency units where the price point would be naturally lower because the units would be smaller. Let's see. We are allowing commercial uses along West Eastland, starting at the corner of Bailey Street and moving on to Eastland. We're not quite sure yet if there will be a demand for that, but we do like the opportunity of having some neighborhood commercial transitioning into the neighborhood, while the facade along Bailey will be restricted to residential only. We're also using a build-to zone rather than a setback to ensure that all the parking will be located behind. We held a community meeting on July 24th and had a good turnout, had great feedback from folks interested in how this would act as a transition. And one of the big concerns was parking, and depending on how much commercial use we end up having in the building, making sure that we have appropriately calibrated the parking to serve both the residents and the commercial uses that would be on site. This property has a great advantage in that it has currently an agreement with the Rite Aid next door for shared parking. You may note that there's actually a structured parking deck along the edge of the Rite Aid, and you can pull through this property onto the underside of that Rite Aid garage. There is an agreement between property owners there, which we would like to maintain, so that if we do need overflow parking for any commercial uses that we might have, that we'll be able to utilize the Rite Aid property for that. Completely unique situation where in a lot of neighborhoods there's frustration or difficulty with parking commercial uses. This is a really unique situation in that the shared parking is already integrated into the relationship between those two properties. You saw in the staff presentation our commitment to high-quality architecture that transitions between, again, the 7 stories that will be allowed on Gallatin Road and the historic neighborhood behind. We're also increasing the pedestrian improvements, adding street trees, and making a much wider sidewalk than is there today, and actually using a stoop condition to transition along grade. So there'll be active, almost like a front porch for the whole building. You know, if you live on the 3rd floor, you can still come down and sort of hang out on this stoop space on the ground floor there. I think with that, I will save my remaining time for afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak in support of the project? All right, seeing none, any in opposition? Please come line up behind the microphone and state your name and your address. And you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Borzak, 1503 Woodland Street. My concern is not necessarily the project itself, but we have a intersection between West Eastland and Eastland going into Galton, and that is not going to be addressed, and that's one of the worst messes in East Nashville going right now. And I had already talked to Joni about this. I have not had the opportunity to talk to our councilman because, frankly, they haven't had a meeting regarding this situation. But this is a major intersection that needs to be improved. And it doesn't look from the plans we're seeing here other than the increase in density. We don't need more traffic there. I don't want to speak against this because I think it's a good project. But the councilmen need to get a plan for fixing that intersection, that transition between West Eastland and Eastland before they become fully operational, because it's going to make it even worse than it is now. And that's my feeling on that. So.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Brett Withers. I live at 1113 Granada Avenue. I'm just a couple of blocks up from this intersection. I kind of want to echo Bob Borzak, who just spoke. If Bob Borzak speaks in favor of something, it must be pretty good. So we both agree on this project, that it is a great project and it's appropriately located. Really, I know that the applicant has made a presentation in the Greenwood neighborhood, and I know a lot of those folks over there. I'm the president of the Eastwood neighborhood, and I know that they're very educated over there, and they've asked good questions, and they've been answered. Really, to reiterate Bob Borzak's point is that we would like as community leaders, we just would like our council members to continue talking with us about future plans for fixing that intersection. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to hold this one up, but we would like to go on record as saying that that is an intersection that desperately needs fixing, and we would like to prioritize that with our council members, that they work with planning and come up with a solution and just keep our neighborhoods apprised of what that is for the traffic situation at that intersection. But otherwise, I think it's a great project. I look forward to seeing it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition on the project? All right, seeing no others, we'll close the public. Oh, yeah, 2 minutes. See, if you want it.
Sure, thank you. We heard those same concerns at our community meeting in July, and we certainly acknowledge that Nashville has many offset intersections that are a difficulty. We cannot fix problems that are not part of our property or adjacent to our property. We think this is an ideal location where people will choose not to drive, not only because of the proximity to goods and services, but also because it's kind of in the nature of East Nashvillians to be to be part of a walkable neighborhood. But we do think that we are working hard to address the things that we can address in terms of making it safer for pedestrians, making it safer for pedestrians to cross back and forth across West Eastland and across Bailey also, and to make those sufficient parking requirements in place so that the people aren't constantly looking for a place to leave that car when they choose to leave it. We do think that these are particular conditions that are not related to our property, would not be precluded from, those problems could be solved with excuse me, I'm going to start that sentence over. This rezoning would not preclude those problems from being solved, if that makes sense. There's nothing in this rezoning that would say the road could not be adjusted or realigned in some way. The standards are according to a build-to zone based on the existing right-of-way, but if that right-of-way were to shift, the building might bend slightly, but the site would still be developable. So we'd like to continue with this SP for the rezoning, and if property owners who are actually at that intersection want to continue the conversation with council members and with decision makers about realigning that and making it a more functional intersection, we're certainly interested in having that conversation, but would like the SP to move forward in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll close the public hearing without objection. So, Mr. Haynes.
No comments.
All right, Derek.
No comments.
Jessica.
No,
Microphone.
I certainly recognize the traffic issue since I deal with that regularly, but otherwise I think it's a good project.
Councilman Hunt.
I have no comments, please.
All right, Stuart. Nothing. Motion.
I'm sorry. Make a motion we approve.
There's been a motion.
With staff recommendations.
There's been a motion to approve with staff recommendations and a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Item number 9 is approved with staff recommendations. Now we're on item number 14. Staff. Are you okay? We keep boards in hand?
I'll get you a picture. You look great. You should have combed your hair. Washed your face.
Y'all be nice.
Just push it down.
He can't look. He wasn't there.
All right.
All right.
Okay. All right, so this is item 14 on your agenda, Simpkins Grocery. This is a request for the development plan for neighborhood landmark to permit a single-family residence and up to 733 square feet for retail use at property located at 1627 Shelby Avenue, located at the corner of Shelby and South 17th Street. Staff recommends approval with conditions. The property is currently zoned R6. It falls within the urban zoning overlay. Also, there is the neighborhood landmark overlay, which was approved in June of this year. And the property also falls in the Lockland Springs East End neighborhood conservation overlay, which was approved in July of this year. So the neighborhood landmark process includes 2 steps. The first step of the process is a rezoning to apply the overlay. That step is complete and the overlay is in effect on this property. The second step is the development plan, which is before you today. While the rezoning to establish the overlay required council approval, the development plan requires the approval of the Planning Commission only. The development plan details the uses. It shows the existing and proposed on-site improvements. Also, it outlines design standards that address site and building conditions. So here we have the plan. The uses proposed include single-family residential, which is currently permitted under the R6 zoning, and retail, which would be limited to 733 square feet. This version of the plan gives you a better view of the parking, which with regard to the zoning code, 2 spaces would be required for the residential component, and no spaces would be required for the retail as the property falls within the urban zoning overlay, which exempts the first 2,000 square feet for retail use. So parking that's available on site, that's been identified in this plan, are 4 spaces on site. So 2 of those would be in the garage. An additional 2 spaces would be available on the driveway. Also, there are 3 possible spaces that would be available on street adjacent to the property. With regard to signage, the The development plan indicates that it may replicate the historic S.W. Simpkins storefront sign, as well as the Coca-Cola signage that you see on the side of the building. No exterior signs are proposed with this plan for the retail use. For hours of operation, the retail component would be open to the public Tuesday, Thursday through Saturday, no earlier than 11 a.m. and no later than 8 p.m., and additionally by appointment only. No events are proposed with this plan. Since initially filed, the plan has been scaled back significantly. Initially, there were more uses proposed as well as events. However, staff worked with the applicant to reduce the overall scale of the plan to make it more compatible with the neighborhood. So here we have some photos of the site. This is just a straight-on shot of the structure. There's the residential component and a view from the corner. Here's the garage and driveway for the on-site parking. And this is just a view of South 17th Street looking towards Shelby Avenue. And in conclusion, staff recommends approval with conditions.
Thank you. And now we will open up item number 14 for public hearing. The applicant, is the applicant here to? Thank you for coming. You have 10 minutes and you can save 2 minutes for rebuttal.
We're husband and wife, can we share that?
You can absolutely share, yes.
But I get the most. I'm kidding.
And you can have 2 minutes for rebuttal, but you have to stop at 8.
And I am recuperating from a cold. Can you understand me okay? Okay. Thank you for hearing this tonight. Thank you for having us. We have a different property than everybody else on the block. It has a 733 square foot retail space attached. In the 30s, 40s, and 50s, it was a grocery store. It was used as a retail space, a neighborhood grocery store. The neighborhood landmark overlay was approved by you and also by Metro Council because the property is unique. It's not like every other house on the street there. It looks like a small store. When we put the pictures of this house for rent up online, we were inundated with people who wanted to put all kinds of businesses in there. And although we didn't advertise that it was ready to go, we just put unique space and wanted to see what would happen. We got proposals for sewing classes, art galleries, Montessori school, office space, because it has this special building attached to, the residents there. We chose Laura and Andrew, who you'll hear from next, the tenants with the business that we'd like to see go in there, because they wanted to restore and recreate that original historic siding that you saw. Melissa, is there a picture of the Simpkins part too that we sent in? Okay. There's a Simpkins grocery sign. I don't know if you guys remember it from the last time we were up or not, but in addition to the Coca-Cola sign, the idea was to restore the Simpkins grocery store signage. And we've always wanted to do that. When we took the old siding down, when we were renovating, or the current siding up, and we saw the old Coca-Cola and Simpkins grocery store signing, people went crazy. They would stop us on the street. We were out there working on it. They'd go, "Oh, wow, look at that. You know, look at that. I remember that grocery store." People would stop and take pictures with it. People wrote articles about it, which is where we got those historic photos from a historical blog that did an article about the building while the siding was down. We even got yelled at when we started to take the siding down. People were angry that we were taking it down, but we couldn't leave it up because it was too rotten to be effective siding. So we also chose Laura and Andrew because they have a well-established, reputable business, retail business. They cater to artists and to people who love beautiful goods. And East Nashville is full of artists and people who love to buy artisan goods. So not only was our intention to restore the property to its historical glory and uniqueness, but also to enhance the artisan shopping options that help to make East Nashville such a wonderful place. I'll leave it at that. I'm sure you want to go. We need to reserve those 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I think you did a great job, even with your voice like that.
You got 1 minute.
Okay. So I bought that property in 1998, actually on April 3rd. And 2 weeks later, I found myself scrambling into the basement because a tornado was coming through. So I have a lot of the crawl space, but even back then, I knew that it was a unique property, and I wanted to do something special with it, and I wanted to do, you know, some sort of commercial space or retail or something, because that's what it was. When I was renovating the property, found all sorts of things inside the house, old photos. There was 3 old Coca-Cola posters from the 30s that have been valued in the hundreds, and there was an old picture of a man standing by a deli case. The deli case window we took out of the deli case and is now the window inside the house. When we were taking down the siding, a gentleman came by and said, I used to come here when I was a kid, and they used to have a parrot here sit by the door, and it would talk to all the people when they came into the store. And so all sorts of people have memories of this place, and so you were right in granting it a neighborhood overlay. Again, East Nashville being a walking neighborhood, we think that this type of establishment, a small retail space, 730 square feet, is not going to have a tremendous parking impact, traffic impact. It's going to be a walkable destination, just 2 blocks, I guess that would be north, going towards Boscobel, or actually that'd be where the Olive and Sinclair, the chocolatiers. So there is already precedence for these type of establishments in East Nashville. And in fact, the Rue Dat from back in the day, and more recently, the T4, I guess, East Nashville Community Plan references these corner nodes and says that they should be supported, and it supports the retail, them going retail. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your consideration.
Yes. And I just would like to add that we worked hard on that site plan to be as low impact on the neighbors as possible. We don't want to be disruptive. Laura and Andrew want to live there. They want to run a quiet, kind, respectful, artisan business that's teeny tiny and that will increase the walkability of the neighborhood and the commercial corner nodes, but yet, keep everybody happy and be respectful.
Thank you. You'll have 2 minutes for a rebuttal at the end. Now,
She's part of the team.
Part of the team.
Hello. My name is Laura Citron, and I currently reside at 1627 Shelby Avenue, along with Andrew Clancy, who is the applicant, and of Any Old Iron, which is the business that we're proposing to put in this location if successfully rezoned. Any Old Iron is a small, artisan, niche boutique clothing store that we've had in New York for the past 5 years. We cater to musicians, emerging designers, and artists, local artists. We provide college students an opportunity to showcase their work. We plan on doing the same for Nashville artists, and exciting collaborations are already in the works. After deciding we needed a change of pace and slower lifestyle, we researched 3 cities, which were Nashville, New Orleans, and Austin. We quickly chose Music City because we dress a lot of musicians. It was sensical, and we felt like the business would be a good transition here. We quickly decided on East Nashville as well to be the location of the boutique because it's its unique, vibrant, and diverse community. The most unique aspect being the walkability. How neat is it to be able to pop out of your house and go to a coffee shop 2 streets up, which we have the Post and we love so much in our neighborhood, or to get a locally designed t-shirt from People Love Art or Any Old Iron, maybe in the future, or a locally sourced candy bar from Olive and Sinclair. It's what makes East Nashville so special. It's the reason that we moved here. It's the reason that people from all over the U.S. and all over the world are moving to East Nashville. My boyfriend is from the U.K. himself, and we just think that it's such a special place, and there's so much potential here, and we really hope we get the opportunity to help it grow. We chose 1627 because it's a unique structure, different than any other on the street, a house attached with the store on the corner. It looks like a store because it used to be a store. It was Simpkins Grocery from the 20s to the 70s, and unfortunately, when the zoning laws went into effect, it wasn't a store, so it kind of slipped through and went into residential. And with that, we found the route at, as Chris was saying, from 1991 that describes revitalizing these nooks in East Nashville after the tornadoes. They talk about 5 points, but then they talk about it stretching out further. And they have a policy that's called 100% corners. And this policy started to revitalize these little corners that used to be stores and turn them into something special. And
you're into your rebuttal time. If you want, you can continue.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say you have our word that we'll do it responsibly and respectfully. And I also want to give you a petition of 130 of our immediate neighbors that we went around.
Thank you. Anyone?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak in support of the project? Please come to the microphone. If you guys could line up. State your name and your address.
My name is Eric Bornhop, Adler. I'm a designer. I live 407 West Mead, Nashville. And I'm just here saying that Andrew and I have been collaborating since he moved here. He's a great guy. And I support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Zev Goring. I live at 1621 Electric Avenue, about 3 blocks from this corner. I have a little section of the park that I live across the street from, and one morning I woke up to this horrible clanking sound of Frisbees being tossed across the street from me at 8 in the morning. And I guess I can't stand the Frisbee golf that's across the street from me. I don't really play Frisbee golf. I don't really want to play Frisbee golf. I guess the thing is that what I realize is that the neighborhood, there's a lot of people using the park. And even though I'm not going to shop at this store because I don't wear those kind of clothes, point is simply that there's a lot more going on that people need a walkable community. I mean, Commissioner Farr mentioned that earlier in another planning commission. So the other comment I wanted to say is that I have also own a few other properties all within a quarter mile of this. And every tenant, there's 14 tenants in 7, 8 different properties. Every tenant moves to East Nashville for this one reason. They want to have a place where they can walk to. They want to have restaurants, they want to have bars, they want to have stores. That's the only reason they come. They don't come for anything else, and they want to be near like-minded people that move to a community that's walkable. And this just reinforces that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Brandon Morton. I live at 1519 Woodland Street. I live a couple of blocks down from the 1627. I live across from Lachlan Table Restaurant, and I've lived in East Nashville for almost 14 years now. So the reason that I moved into East Nashville was for this very reason. So I could walk to restaurants, I could walk and go get a cupcake, I can go get chocolate, I can do any of that. So that's the reason that I moved into East Nashville. So I've had the pleasure of meeting Laura and Andrew and actually working with them in the fashion industry also. And I was a business owner in East Nashville and own a business also. So what I liked about the neighborhood was that everybody supported each other and really supported businesses, and we try to keep it in the neighborhood and that's how we all make our living doing that. So, and I think that all the cons about it, about being open and the parking and all that, all the good that they're bringing to the city outweighs all of that. And I mean, we're talking about a 733 square foot building. It's not going to be a big raging party for that and a big raging parking lot of cars or anything like that. So, and it's on a busy street. So the ones that are concerned with their children playing in the streets, they're not having their children play on Shelby. So we all walk in the neighborhood and there's plenty of walkability and we all look after each other, but I am in support of this. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Please line up behind the microphone.
My name is Nicole Turner, and I have property at 926 Riverside. I lived in East Nashville for 8 years and still currently have property there. I moved to East Nashville because of the unique opportunities that were there, the historic overlays, the artisan shops and areas, and I love East Nashville because of that. I helped them do some landscaping and restoration. I do edible landscaping, and I know that even in my interest in the community as far as landscaping and the edible opportunities in East Nashville, just maybe 2 blocks up the road from this is the Urban Green Lab. I don't know if you all are familiar with Urban Green Lab. They do great works in the community. They have an example house just a few blocks up from this storefront. And when I look at this building, I can't think of anything other than a storefront. I think that the ideas that they're proposing are a great fit for what East Nashville represents, and it's right to say that all over the country, people are talking about what East Nashville means and what it has to offer and making their way here. So I would hate to think that somebody on their way would be discouraged from doing the very thing that it stands for. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, my name is Christopher Pennington. I live at 77 Braidwood Drive. I am a student at Omar College of Design, and I don't live in East Nashville, but I spend a tremendous amount of time there. And I just love the walking around and seeing these shops. And then I met Andrew and learned about his shop and the prospects and how he wants to integrate young designers and young artisans into his shop. And that's a very great thing for my peers and myself to be able to have the opportunity to sell our clothes and our art in his shop. So, thank you.
Hello, my name is Chi-Chi Deshani. I live in Old Hickory, near the Hermitage. And while I may not be the customer for Andrew's shop, I do know Andrew and Laura, and they are the type of people that I think are really needed in a little community like this. They're nice, upstanding people. The parents raised them well. They're considerate, and I think would be what's the word? An asset to the community. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sharon Emerson. I live at 1610 Eastland Avenue, and I actually bought my house because I liked it. But what I ended up finding out is that, yes, indeed, there's a lot of walkability, a lot of advantages to that. And I think the one thing to keep in mind here is the fact that the zoning is not unrestricted, but I understand that they're proposing a very restricted use here. And I think what people get upset about is the fact that they fear a lot of traffic. I drive down 17th Avenue home every day, and I know when on Wednesday nights when the church is having their service, and then you have the coffee shop and you have the chocolate shop who they are closed at that time, but then you have the other clothing shop, that it can get quite congested. But I think the one thing to keep in mind is the fact they are restricting what the use is going to be, and they're not opening it up to once, if the clothing store decides to move, that it can't then become a bar. So I think that's just one thing to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the proposal? Councilman, you want to speak now or at the end? Okay. All right, now we're, anyone in opposition wishing to speak? Please come forward and line up behind the podium if you would. State your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Smith. I live at 1800 Russell Street, and I'm currently the president of the Laughlin Springs Neighborhood Association. And in that capacity, I have received many phone calls and emails in regards to this change. It's been difficult. We've tried to mediate, but we've had a little bit of trouble making that happen. We do value our commercial corners in Laughlin Springs. They are what make our neighborhood unique and lovable. We support commercial use, but we do not support retail use at this specific location. Other commercial corners have been developed with careful advanced planning by studying the traffic patterns, historic use, neighborhood culture, adjacent properties, etc. This application is backwards. We're creating a permanent plan for this corner without looking beyond this specific commercial enterprise to the future use of the building. What we really should be asking is, how does this corner fit into the fabric of the neighborhood? What type of commercial use would best blend with this primarily residential area? We submit that any retail use does not fit. Retail hours and activities are not congruent with the neighbor's desire for normal residential life, which is what they expected when purchasing in an area zoned R6. Primarily residential areas usually devote the time from 5 to 8 p.m. to children playing outside, families enjoying their yards or porches for meals and conversation, and Saturdays are traditionally spent doing many things like yard work, projects, having guests, or walking to some of the many events that we have in Laughlin Springs. Combining this with retail use is not a comfortable fit on this corner. However, this specific retail plan does fit in our East Nashville culture, and there are many other places where it would be welcomed. The immediate neighbors purchased their homes in a residential area, and this neighborhood landmark designation did not really raise an alarm with us because we value that as well. Since the stated purpose of a landmark designation is to protect from demolition, not to change use. Here, as another of the commissioners has stated earlier, I think we have let the dog wag the tail. May I finish my sentence, or should I?
Yeah, just finish your sentence.
In that we are not developing with deliberation and thoughtful intention after reflection. We as a neighborhood support increasing density and tax base, but by design, not by chance. Thank you.
Please state your name and
Are you going to start it after when I start talking on the button?
It's to start when the
My name is Carol Norton. I live at 801 Boscobel Street, District 6. The site plan has included the owner and the tenant's assertion of conforming to the RUDAT plan for redevelopment of East Nashville, as well as the East Nashville Community Plan. I provided them the correct information on July 28th, the night before the final site plan deadline, and I wish to restate the facts refuting the applicant's assertion. The RUDAT, the Regional Urban Design Assistant Team, is an initiative of the AIA providing comprehensive planning assistance to a community in need of a recovery plan. It produced a revitalization strategy for rebuilding East Nashville following the tornado of 1998. It requires a local AIA member selected as the steering committee chair to coordinate national AIA volunteers, local community leaders, local government. Unfortunately, Commissioner G isn't here. He was our local chairman, so he is intimately knowledgeable of what the RUDAT states. As neighborhood president at the time, I served on the steering committee and have been associated with Rediscover East since that time. For economic and commercial revitalization, RUDAT's plan recognized 3 areas of need, one defined as 100% commercial corners, somewhat unique to East Nashville. Small commercial developments at strategic intersections throughout our neighborhood, partly, largely, or entirely devoted to commercial use. Specialized zoning would be required to both encourage their success and yet protect adjacent and surrounding residential neighbors from commercial encroachment. The details are on page 4.8 and 9. Rediscover East, the nonprofit created to carry out the RUDAT plan, initiated and implemented the extension of our 5 points redevelopment plan to protect our corners and carry out that directive. This location did not then and does not now meet the requirements for 100% corners. As a single abandoned use of some 50 years,
thank you,
there was no justification for its inclusion. I'll have this available if any of you are not familiar with it and want to look at the details.
Hi, my name is Lisa Bastarash. I live on 1626 Shelby. That's right across the street from the property in question. Last March, this committee approved the Neighborhood Landmark Overlay, which I'll call NLO for short, for 1627 Shelby. I'd like to thank the committee for its commitment to preservation. I love old houses. I'd be sad to see a structure like 1627 torn down to make room for something that doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood. At the meeting in March, 2 key points were brought up in the NLO discussion. First, the purpose is to preserve unique features and structures that the neighborhood deems important. Second, if the overlay is passed, as it was in this case, the committee has no obligation to approve any site plan whatsoever, and that the purpose of the site plan itself is to preserve the structure. 1627 is not a vacant building. It is in good repair. It is definitely not crumbling from neglect. The residence has been rented out continuously, and I'm sure profitably, in the 5 years that I've lived across the street. In short, this structure is a viable residential property that will continue to be preserved as a residential property, as it has been for roughly half a century. If the only purpose of the NLO and site plan is to preserve structures, a fact that it was emphasized by the committee at this last meeting, then the committee should consider its job complete. Any further use that is approved would be, in my opinion, a backdoor effort to transform a residential property into a commercial one without going through the proper channels. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chris Mumford, and I live at 406 South 17th Street, directly behind the proposed store. I've lived in Nashville for 25 years, most of those as a homeowner in East Nashville. I do not fear living near retail. In fact, when I lived on Fifth Avenue in Germantown in the early 2000s, I ran down to this very meeting, maybe a different building, but voiced my support for mixed-use development on Fifth and Madison, the current home of the Germantown Cafe. I'm a huge supporter of appropriate mixed use. This is not appropriate. I chose to buy my home in a residential area. I am pro-small business. I visit my chiropractor on Main Street. My nail salon and massage therapist are in the Porter Road development. I enjoy shopping and dining in Five Points in the Eastland and Fatherland districts. With all of these amazing commercially zoned areas in East Nashville, my neighbors and I keep asking ourselves why this proposal for our residential neighborhood. And this house has not been commercial in decades if it was ever really commercially zoned. Part of the equation of this neighborhood landmark designation requires neighborhood support. We are a welcoming bunch, but saying no to a store that just plain doesn't make sense should not be interpreted as unwelcoming. We have seen the red flags. The owners of this property, Chris and Elliot Hauser, advertised 1627 Shelby as commercial in January. Commissioners, you have the ad in your packets. This use resides with the property, not Mr. Clancy. I implore you, please do not approve this final site plan.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Robert Herb. I live at 506 Village Court, which is about 2 blocks south of the proposed shop. We've gone through numerous emails that you guys received regarding this final site plan. We would like to point out that the local emails written in opposition with Nashville addresses far outweigh support for a retail store. Commissioners, we respect your time and sent letters opposed to this proposal in good faith. After weeding through more than 140 emails, the count in this folder right here, only including those with Nashville addresses, show that there were 41 letters opposed to the final site plan, with only 9 in favor. 41 local citizens and organizations took time to write letters opposed to this plan. Letters written by individuals who do not live, work, or own property in the immediate area should not be given the same considerations that are afforded to the neighbors in the immediate region, if any at all. We ask that you do not approve this final site plan. Thank you.
Can I take that minute? No, okay. Good afternoon, evening now, Planning Commissioners. My name is Edwin Wilmore, and I live at 1626 Shelby, directly across the street from the property in question. 1627 Shelby, the Simpkins grocery store. When the words Simpkins Grocery are used to describe the building, they are utterly incomplete and actually quite deceptive. It really ought to be referred to as the Simpkins House and Grocery, because the majority of the structure consists of a bungalow and not the attached grocery store. And it was the attached nature of this house and corner store structure that swayed the commission to approve the NLO in March. It was not that there is a corner store at this corner. So now this commission is being asked to consider a use outside of the underlying R6 zoning for a portion of the building. For the past many years, maybe 60 years, it has been a residence without any legal commercial use. The building has not lain fallow and fallen into disuse. In fact, this structure, the Simpkins House and Grocery, is a desirable residence in a desirable residential neighborhood. As a residence, the building is copacetic with the plan of the neighborhood, and I like the neighborhood plan. This corner has never been a commercial corner, besides the Simpkins House and Grocery, as is evidenced by the other 3 structures on the corner predating World War II. So anyone talking about this being a 100% corner or having ever been a 100% corner would have to be in error, considering 1904, my neighbor on the corner was built, the Temple of Judah and the other building kitty corner. This is not a 4-corner intersection at all. In the end, this is really isn't a rezoning hearing as many people seem to think. This is about what is necessary to preserve this building. If these business people want to open a store, then they ought to open a shop in a commercial building. If the structure owners want to own a commercial space, they should request a rezoning of this space, not try to push it through as a neighborhood landmark and then assume that there's an inevitability that they will be able to foist whatever plans they have upon the neighbors. Please disapprove. Thank you.
Good evening. I have a handout.
Yeah, you can give it to the staff.
I am Garrett Davis. I live at 1625 Shelby Avenue, a property right next door to the proposed store. Over the course of many meetings, email chains, and in-person discussions about this proposal, I must say that I've developed quite a bit of respect for the degree of difficulty and complexity in arriving at a decision the Planning Commission must endure. Cities are very complex ecosystems made up of hundreds of thousands of individual people living their lives. Each side of town, neighborhood, block, and street has its own unique personality and many factors that make it a distinguishable, unique place. Attempting to understand all the necessary factors to arrive at a reasoned conclusion takes a great deal of effort. Luckily, there are people that we can turn to that understand quite well many of the factors that may not fit into a PowerPoint presentation or a graph. Luckily, there are people who live their day-to-day lives on those streets and blocks that we can tap for insight into a small part of our huge ecosystem that is Nashville. I'm speaking, of course, about the neighbors near this proposed store. I implore you to listen to the neighbors on this issue. The opposition in such strong unity must account for something. I submit that the reason for this opposition is, at its heart, an understanding that this store would do more harm than good for our small part of Nashville, a conclusion that is derived from careful consideration of all the complex factors that a person entertains when the place that they have chosen to invest gets a major change such as this. I simply ask that you listen to the collective voices of the neighbors and vote to keep this site plan as residents only. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Shannon Casey. I'm the owner and resident at 1622 Shelby Avenue. I'm diagonal to the property at 1627. I've resided on Shelby Avenue since 2007, and I want to be clear that I'm supportive of retail development in East Nashville, and I'm actually a fan of the proposed store, Any Old Iron. I love their aesthetic. But I want to be clear that all streets in East Nashville are not appropriate for retail development. My neighbors and I are opposed to the proposal for retail development at 1622 Shelby Avenue. We do not feel that the property owner, who does not reside on Shelby Avenue, has had the best interest of Shelby Avenue in their decision process. This is not the first time the property has been used as a retail or business. The property owner leased this property to a renter who operated a noisy and smelly and rowdy doggy daycare from this property for several years. After that tenant was moved out, the property was leased to a group that used the historic space as a music rental or music rehearsal space, which created a lot of parking woes and, again, a noise ordinance for us. The property owner, in our opinion, has used this historic overlay as a backdoor to push through the zoning conditions that we're discussing today. And those zoning conditions only benefit the property owner. They do not benefit the quality of life of those of us on Shelby or in East Nashville. And I'd like to point out that of the 5 people who are in favor, or 5 or 6 in favor of the store, none of them live in walking distance, with exception to maybe one on Electric, to this store. The site plan says there are 7 parking spaces. 1 is for the owner or for the resident. So where are those 6 people going to park? And anyone else who wants to come to the area. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Davis, and I live at 1625 Shelby Avenue. If you're looking at the house, it's directly to the right. Actually, my newborn son is only 10 feet from the property itself. We brought this home because we understood that it was in a residential area and that the other homes around it were residential. We just started a family, and we were hoping to have a place where our child could grow up and play with the other neighborhood children. And I know someone mentioned that you wouldn't play on Shelby, but we actually are very good friends with both families across the street from us that have small children, and we play in the yard on Saturdays and in the evenings after work. We do support this store. We want it to move to East Nashville, but we don't think that this is a good location. We're pro-small business. I'm actually pro-fashion. My parents were in the fashion industry for years, but I just don't think that this is a good area. When we did talk about the site plan, none of our concerns were answered in that site plan that they proposed to you too. So I would just ask you to oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Emil Sandoz, and I live at 1808 Fatherland Street. I have 3 points. First, fairness to the neighbors should be among the most important considerations you weigh in this decision. Not that neighbors should have veto authority, but there should be a very compelling reason to reject their wishes, especially the neighbors closest to the project, because the outcome will affect them the most daily, their investment, their quality of life. So in light of the tremendous opposition to this plan, it should not be approved because there's no overriding need for this plan. Secondly, please consider the findings that we already have. East Nashville has been the focus of numerous comprehensive studies in recent past, and several locations have been identified where this business would be suitable. In any one of those locations, this business would be welcomed, even welcomed by those of us opposing its location on Shelby. Therefore, the plan should not be approved because there's no compelling reason that has been offered to reject previous findings. And in fact, the previous findings don't identify this as an appropriate use. They identify other areas, and people have spoken about the RUDAP plan at all as not being supportive of this rather than being supportive. Third and finally is a closely related issue of fidelity. I can best explain this with a story. One Christmas Eve, my father and brothers worked together to assemble a tricycle. Each man did an excellent job with the pieces he put together. In the end, they discovered, however, that the 3 units they put together wouldn't fit to create a whole. It made a long Christmas Eve become painfully longer. Planning is better when we think holistically, not in parts.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. My name is Brett Withers. I live at 1113 Granada Avenue. I am a little bit of a distance from this property, but I am the president of the Eastwood neighborhood, and I'm here to lend my support to our cousins to the south, Laughlin Springs. I urge you to support the wishes of the Laughlin Springs Board of Directors and reject the present site plan for 1627 Shelby. I'm specifically speaking in support of my peer, Elizabeth Smith, who spoke with you first, who is the Laughlin Springs neighborhood president. Elizabeth is a school teacher, and I'm sure she's a great one because she can keep conversations respectful and productive. If the council member and the applicants had utilized her talents and her position as the neighborhood president to moderate the discussion about what, if any, commercial uses the neighborhood association would support for 1627 prior to filing this rezoning, there would have been much less divisiveness on this issue. The landmark overlay district adds land uses above residential as a preservation incentive. Losing the unique structure at 1627 would have been a shame, particularly in advance of Laughlin's overlay expansion to Shelby, which was announced in January. But there have been many other tragic losses. What is it that privileges 1627 Shelby above other buildings that we considered landmarks that were bulldozed? The only thing the neighbors can find is the desire to impose commercial uses on this residentially zoned site without consulting with the neighbors to learn what they might consider to be acceptable conditions or uses. I ask that you heed the wishes of the neighborhood and disapprove the site plan. Mr. Clancy has offered some compromises. I spoke with him, and I'm grateful for that. But I'm not hearing that the neighbors are comfortable with those conditions. Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you do? My name is Harold Lauren, and I live at 1622 Shelby Avenue. I've been living there for about 1.5 years now, and I've been a participant and in this process with my neighbors, and I think it's important to express and for you to understand that there's a process issue here that seems to be undermining the will of the neighbors, and the opposition to the site plan is based upon a desire to keep that place residential use only, because of an entire series of points that we've brought up that keep being washed over. So I just would like to state for the record and that I oppose the site plan, and I would like to ask you, I would like to urge you to oppose the site plan as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to speak in opposition?
My name's Bob Borzak, 1503 Woodland Street. Lived in East Nashville 29 years. I'm going to finish what Carol Norton was trying to complete in her presentation. And the fact is, our inner ring neighborhoods had commercial uses scattered everywhere in the neighborhood, anywhere until comprehensive zoning. Resurrecting abandoned commercial uses in residential areas is a dangerous precedent to set. And we've found examples of these precedences that have been going on for the last several years that are biting us back, and we've become very, very suspicious of anything like this, what they're trying to do. And East Nashville has come too far to take a giant step back by allowing a site plan for commercial use at 1627 Shelby, and we hope you'll vote to oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? All right, you have 2 minutes for 151. 1 minute and 51 seconds for your rebuttal.
The neighbors mentioned the ongoing issues that they brought up. Every neighborhood meeting we had, it was always traffic and parking. We feel like we've addressed that with planning's help. Parking is ample. They have no more than 5 to 10 cars at any time in their store per day. They keep talking about the fact that this was, why are we doing this? Because it's not like the other buildings on the street. It is a special building. It used to be a grocery store. People walked there. It was a retail space for food and deli meats and things like that. They talk about the 41 emails that were local against and only 9 for, but we have 130 signatures on a petition that we submitted to you that are in favor of this retail space that are in East Nashville. They talked about Commissioner Gee not being here. However, when this was presented to you before last time, he was the one that spoke up about how his daughter called 5 Points the most magical place on earth because she could walk and get ice cream and go to get something to eat and get a hot dog and see a movie. And he talked about how that is what East Nashville is about, the walkability of commercial corners. We're not asking to put a retail space in a Victorian house that has in a garage in the back. We're asking you to consider a very limited retail space that's hopefully not intrusive to the neighbors at all. And that in a space that used to be retail. It's not like we're just inventing it out of nothing. That's the main concern. And why this corner? Because look at it. It's got a store attached to it. It used to be a retail space. We put in lots of time and effort to try to make it as limited as possible. We chose people who aren't going to be having loud parties and be disruptive. They want to live there and
real quick, there's been this assertion that we're trying to take some sort of back door route to push this through. This was what was suggested how we take this by planning. Thank you.
All right. Without objection, we'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I need to just technically explain the process to some of the commissioners. Oh, that's right. The councilman may want to speak.
Yes.
Right.
Councilman.
Thank you, members of the commission. I appreciate having the opportunity to speak before you. And I appreciate everyone in the audience today who has come before you to speak as well. I appreciate their comments. Each of them did bring a very well thought out point and perspective, which I do appreciate. I will say that generally when I've come before this body, I've had the opportunity to say that there is a strong consensus that of something that I would be supporting. In this case, I'm afraid that that's not been reached. To give a little bit of history of the process, and maybe this is what Mr. Bernhardt was going to step into, this began back when the applicants approached the planning staff and asked them about what sort of opportunities would there be for use of this sort on this corner in this particular property. They reached out to me and we had a conversation. They ran it by historic, and we felt that at the time that was a recommendation from the planning staff that this would be an appropriate application of the neighborhood landmark to protect the building and to offer an opportunity to have some additional uses not guaranteed within the base zoning. So the hope was at that time that this could move forward, and then we'd have the opportunity to meet with neighbors, to get everyone comfortable with what uses were being described in the final site plan. This also predated what is now the extension of the Lachlan Springs Conservation Overlay. At the time that we began this process, it did not include this area. We felt that it was unique property. It has unique attributes and characteristics that we felt were worth preserving on their own, and we felt that this would be something that would be an appropriate way to move forward. We did not intend this, and I don't think that staff ever meant this to be any way to circumvent any sort of base zoning. Early concerns that came up that some folks have alluded to in their comments this afternoon and this evening, as well as via email, have been about traffic and parking. And this is an intersection where we have had a number of concerns over the last couple of years. I happen to live a few blocks away and often use this intersection. I can tell you that it does have some issues. We have worked with Public Works to install more than no parking signs to increase the sight lines. I've been talking with Public Works for quite some time, including this past week, about trying to get an idea of what is the best manner to deal with those issues. And I say this a lot for the folks who are here today so they can hear me say this publicly, that it is my intention to move forward with Public Works for some mode of traffic calming on this intersection. Whether that pertains to this site plan or not, fine, but I do want to publicly state that that is something I'm determined to address as soon as we can. And we have discussed everything from roundabouts to four-way stops, and we're trying to figure out what is the most appropriate method to deal with any traffic issues. As you've heard, the church across the street, when they have their meetings 3 to occasionally 4 times a week, there are a lot of cars in the area. There are some issues with parking. As we all know, in urban neighborhoods like East Nashville, for better or for worse, on-street parking is public parking, and we do our best as times to be good neighbors, and sometimes most of the time, I would say that's not an issue. And I think that their parking plan they've provided tries to address this as best as possible. As far as the use, and this is where it gets down into, I think, what are the more difficult things and I'd ask you to think through, is it's been my belief that this was and has been and remains an appropriate site for a neighborhood landmark. As far as uses, I understand that this is where the controversy is clearly before us. In 733 square feet, I don't think you're going to have a tremendous impact, but clearly you will have some. I don't know exactly what types of use is the best opportunity here. I think that for me, when this was brought before me and we had conversations initially with staff, it was the form that drove the process. The form of this structure is unique. And while I wasn't around for the creation of the RUDAT, I do believe that elements of the RUDAT, elements of the plan of Nashville, and things that we, reinforce themes that I believe in, that very limited commercial uses on certain corners can be very appropriate and can be very beneficial to neighborhoods. Shelby is a collector street. It has bus service. It has a bike lane. It is a street where I think we could look at something like this in a very limited context. While I understand everyone is not comfortable with retail, I think that there are conditions placed on the retail operation that help make me a little bit more comfortable with that. Primarily, there's no signage to be allowed other than what already historically there. If there's a business there, most businesses, I know you guys deal with this quite frequently, they want to advertise through a big sign. and that is not something that's going to be present within this. There's also a restriction that it is going to be owner-occupied or rental-occupied, so whomever lives there must also use that store. I don't think that it's opening up a Pandora's box of retail. The owners of the property have indicated that they would be willing to go through any other public process if there were an additional, or if there was a change in tenants. And I think that that also gives me some comfort with this as well. So at the end of the day, I understand that there are a number of neighbors here who are not comfortable with any sort of retail. I respect their opinion, and I believe that what this has come to with the restrictions on the retail is something where I respectfully disagree with them, that this is not a use that will be will not overly impact or have any sort of tangible, negligible impact for them. I think it does offer us an opportunity to use a unique space in a unique manner, and I would hope that we'd be able to, and again, my hope would be that we would be able to find more common ground than we've been able to find. And I would say also that this process has been difficult. There has been some misunderstandings and some miscommunications. I will accept part of the blame for that. I did not perhaps make it as clear to some of the neighbors what the process of the neighborhood landmark entailed. If there were any misunderstandings that people had based on that, then I do apologize and ask for that. Ask them for forgiveness on that. What it comes down to, though, is just a philosophical approach to how we treat our urban neighborhoods. Where I come from is a perspective that believes that limited retail or limited commercial uses can fit very well within an urban context in the right locations. I believe this location is appropriate for that. Clearly, there are neighbors who do not agree with that. I would ask for your approval of this, but I also understand that this is a difficult decision because of the lack of unanimity for this particular project. So I'd ask for your thoughtful consideration of this, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that may come up.
Thank you, Councilman. Chairman McLean? Or Rick, did you want to add anything to the history? Yes, public hearing is closed.
Yeah, I don't want to add really to the history, but I want to explain kind of the role of this and hopefully dissuade any concerns that the process is not appropriate, because I think the intent of the neighborhood landmark is to engage the community in discussing whether a feature, building, or landmark is important to the neighborhood. It doesn't have to be historic, but whatever is there is important to the neighborhood. And that was the first process that went through, and the council said this is important. The second part is equally critical here, because once a neighborhood landmark has been established, what it does is this establishment of a neighborhood landmark says it's not appropriate to rezone this property. That otherwise you would have simply rezoned the property. What's important is to preserve the structure, and in order to preserve the structure, we will allow the process, which is what you're in now, to consider alternative uses for that feature, that structure, that may not be appropriate or permitted under the zoning. So that's what the commission is here to consider today, is what, if any, uses would be appropriate here. There's not an obligation on the part of the commission to approve anything because it is a neighborhood landmark. And there are neighborhood landmarks, in fact there's one in East Nashville at 9th and Russell that has existed for a number of years without any alternative uses other than the base zoning uses. So there's not an obligation on the part of the commission. The obligation of the commission is to consider, as you go through the neighborhood landmark and you go through the development plan, is to consider whether, based on the neighborhood input and based on your evaluation of that input, all that you've gotten, whether this is an appropriate use and what, if any, conditions are there. There's not an obligation to approve it or not.
Just for the record, without objection, we will close the public hearing. We'll clarify that. Thank you, Rick, for that update. Chairman McLean?
Yeah, I grew up in East Nashville, and I remember my mother sending me to the grocery store just about every afternoon. I don't think we had a refrigerator at that time. And I like to see these buildings, the ones that I went to around the 10th and Woodland area, all that's been torn out, and those stores that go by, they're no longer there. This happens to be one that I wasn't close to, but it has been preserved through the years. It's kind of like a warehouse being recycled, where it was a warehouse and now it's residential. And I know we hear that everybody's in favor of retail, but not particular to this particular place, you know, because it's close by. And I understand that. If I lived there, I don't know how I would feel, but I think it's appropriate. The type of business, as I understand, that's going to be there is not a mass of influx of people. It's going to be standing in the door coming in, or it's going to have a lot of parking requirements. And I think it's appropriate, and they've got limited hours. It's not going to be every morning from 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. So I'm in favor of it, and I think it's appropriate.
Stuart?
Rick, about the neighborhood input, when I was listening to you, it sounded a little bit like this process is a little bit more tied to neighborhood input than most of our decisions, where we try to hear from all neighbors, but we make planning decisions and we're not really counting votes. Can you address this?
Right. This is not a situation where you're evaluating it against policy. This is a situation of the neighborhood landmarks, and the commission's probably done, I don't know, 20 of them, I guess, or so, all across the city, and all kind of in suburban neighborhoods as well. They are primarily, the whole purpose of this, and again, it's not a historic landmark. This is a neighborhood landmark that's saying that the preserving of the building or the preserving of the feature, whatever it is important to the character of the neighborhood. They did that, and so they're willing to allow, so that's the first process. If there isn't neighborhood support for preserving the structure, then it's not even to be considered a neighborhood landmark.
That goes to the structure.
That goes, or the feature. I mean, there's some cultural features. I mean, you had one today with the one on 12 South that was more of a cultural feature than it was a building. And you've had one, what was the one up off Neely's Bend, the barn, yeah, Larry's Grand Old Garage. There wasn't anything significant about that, but there was a cultural importance to that then allowed them to come in, and you can consider the use. And it's important, again, that if this building, if this were torn down, and this is not to say that this would comply or not comply with the conservation overlay, forget that part, but if it's torn down, then the zoning is in place. The use doesn't ride with the property. The use rides, whatever uses are approved ride with the preservation of the feature or preservation of the structure. So these were designed in both cases and are clear that there is more of a neighborhood consensus approach than either an entitlement or a policy consistency approach that the commission needs to look at.
So if we approve this, it would be specific to this use
and structure, or yeah.
Well, which?
The structure, because again, if the structure goes away, the use is only there because of the neighborhood overlay, which is only there if the structure is there.
If a different use, even a slightly different use, were to be sought, would that come back before us?
If a use that was not part of what you approved is sought, it would come by. Yeah. If you approved a retail use, for example, and they wanted to run an office use, that would have to come back.
Down to the square footage that we've heard today?
Whatever your conditions are, hours of operation, parking, anything, whatever the conditions are is what gets approved.
Chairman McLean, do you recall this being a grocery store? This specific place?
I didn't go to that particular one. I did remember that. I went to Baylor to Lockland Springs School, and it was close by.
So you remember it being there as a store? This is a really unique question, and I'm really still thinking about it. I understand it it doesn't have overwhelming close neighborhood support. It's hard in some ways for some of us to see why this could be so divisive, and yet it's not a neighborhood either. I think Councilman Westerholm made a very good statement about the form. This doesn't mean that every old place in East Nashville or Hillsborough West End will get one of these. This one, pretty clearly from the physical evidence, was a store, was a particular retail store. So I'm going to listen to the councilman and others and think about this.
Councilman Hunt?
Yeah, I'm going to do like my colleague on the right. I want to no comments until I hear Commissioner Haynes has come out.
Just in order to say no comment.
Yes.
Thank you, Councilman. I guess I get to go next.
Yeah, Jeff. Name's been called.
Couple of clarifications for staff. If Mr. Clancy were to not live in this structure, could he continue to operate his business in this structure?
There is not a condition that would tie him to live here. Now, the development plan does indicate that the people who live there will run the store, but we did not include that as our condition. But that is definitely something that you could include as your condition, that whoever lives there has to work in this. Could that be included? Yeah. Right, but it is in the plan, yes.
But it's not a condition.
It is not a condition, but you could most certainly add that.
And then secondly, if he closes the store down,
okay,
but lives in the house,
that would be completely permitted as it's currently permitted by the base zoning.
If I could just clarify the last point, this development plan is for single-family residents and for the retail. It does limit the retail to the two people who are also living in the house. So while I think they could live in the house but not operate the retail, there's not an opportunity for other people to run the retail establishment.
so if he decided his business grew and he had to move the business but continued to live there, he couldn't sublease the 733 square feet to another retail establishment?
That's correct.
Okay.
And they would need a new development plan to have that kind of arrangement.
And then lastly, if he moves out of both and the housers want to release it to another retail tenant and occupant, they would have to come back with a new plan.
No, not necessarily. If they change the use, then they would have to come back with the plan or the arrangements that are specified in the plan. Now, as far as the 733 square feet of retail use and residents that are, if it were to be approved, specified in the plan, they run with the land, not necessarily the property owner or the business owner.
I'm going to support this. I think this goes back to the old days of people living in the same structure where they conducted their business. I understand the divisiveness in the neighborhood. I happen to think this is an appropriate use in an appropriate location.
Derek?
I just want to follow up. If this property sold, how would that affect this current scenario?
Well, the ownership, the approval would not run with the ownership. It's with the land and with the feature, as Rick said. So if the feature were to be destroyed, then, this would go away as well.
Okay. All right.
The basic conditions are that you have to live in the house to operate the retail.
Okay.
That's the basic condition.
Thank you.
But not that these two people have to live in the house to operate it.
No, it's not named, but you have to live in the house to operate the retail, but not necessarily these two by name.
Jessica?
Well, yes, I actually live in the neighborhood, so and I'm very familiar with the corner. And interestingly, I've always driven down there and thought, why is there not a retail space there? So, I mean, it has always stood out to me as something that looked like it should be a store. I do think we have some other corners in addition to the one that we've talked about on Fatherland and 17th. There's also what used to be the East Garden on Russell and 16th, I think, which is almost the exact same thing. So I feel like there is a precedent for things like this. I appreciate the fact that they're only open a few days a week, so I anticipate that traffic would be fairly limited. And again, I don't think the traffic impact would be as great as what you have with the churches that are right there, which do cause a significant congestion problem on those streets. I appreciate the concern in the neighborhood of not wanting to have, a lot of noise and activity in a residential area. I too have small kids that are on the street. I have a lot of concerns about traffic on Shelby in general, but that's a whole different issue. So I think I can support this use in that site.
Thank you. Thank you. We need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the staff recommendations.
There's been a motion to approve and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and it is approved. Now we are on to item number.
Fascinating case. I could see it going
Item number 17, the Historic Zoning Commission. Usually the commissioner that is absent gives that report, but Rick, you have anything to report on that?
No.
All right, on the Board of Parks and Recreation, that's me. I was not at the last meeting, but there was a Greenways opening, and that's all I have to report for that. Item number 19, Executive Committee. Let's move to the director's report.
Yeah, with the director's report, you should have that. I don't think there's anything in particular. Notice we're in the middle of a number of lounges with Nashville Next and other.
If everybody could just step outside the room, we'll finish up the meeting. Thank you.
There's not anything in particular, just that we are moving forward, and with that, I think everything else is covered in the director's report written.
All right, Walter, anything in the council?
Wasn't their fault.
Yeah, I think that we'll get a little relief on the 19th, which is next week. We will be passing that contextual overlay bill finally. I think all the sides have agreed on the amendments. We're going to be meeting with the residents tomorrow, because that's the only group we hadn't met with yet. And I think they've been very patient, and we're going to meet with them, and after that, we'll be ready to pass the bill on the 19th.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other business? Without objection, we adjourn.
All righty.